Okay, one of the exciting uses of the super knob is changing between sounds. You can morph one sound into another sound. Now in this particular example, I'm using two parts, okay? So now it gets a little more complex. We're going to hear two parts at once. Remember, you can have up to 8 parts under keyboard control and 16 parts total, and you can have this kind of control amongst the parts. So here you have a button on the screen that says type name. I'm going to touch that so you can see here that I've named these two things sawtooth and square. So one of the waves is a sawtooth wave. Now, if you're not familiar with sawtooth waves, now I remember the whole history of analog synthesizers. It's wonderful. Back on when I was a kid, my first analog synthesizer had 2 waveforms. Now we give you something like 3,647 waveforms in the montage. I don't know how you can make any sounds with 6, all that. It's just incredible. I used to make all the sounds with just 2. I got a sawtooth wave and I got a pulse wave, right? Or the square wave. So you can build all kinds of synthesizer sounds. When you have analog, these are the fundamental sounds. And there are 2 families of sounds. The sawtooth is every harmonic. Now, as musicians, we need to understand harmonics. It's a very important part of what we do. A harmonic, if I had to explain it, is a whole integer multiple of the fundamental. Now that sounds very technical, but let's break it down. So if I'm playing A110, all right, and I'll use A110 because the math is a little easier, all right? The second harmonic to that would be 110 times 2, which would be 220. And as you know, that's an octave, all right? Times 3 would be 330. Well, that gives you an E. This is the harmonic series. Times 4 would be 440. So there's your basic harmonic. All right. Well, it gets painful. But the harmonic series is whole integer multiples of the fundamental. All right? It's every harmonic. And as you hear a sound, the harmonics are the key to you recognizing a sound. Now, if I tell you that there's a trombone playing and there's a trumpet playing, and they're both playing A440, you know that you can tell the trumpet from the trombone. They have different harmonic content. In other words, within that sound, there are times when that instrument is oscillating at these different harmonic frequencies. So, picture a piano string. We're probably more familiar with that. When you have a piano string in motion, all right, at some point, if you're playing A440, there are 440 sine waves along that string. If you had a high-speed camera, at some point there are 880, all right? At some point there are all these other harmonics, whole integer multiples of that fundamental, all right? So, in a sawtooth wave, you're hearing all the harmonics. The first harmonic, the second harmonic, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and so forth. In a square wave, you only hear the odd number harmonics. So the even number harmonics are missing. And what this sound, and while I'm using these 2 sounds, is because to our ear, they are very different. So all harmonics, and I'm going to morph to where you just hear the odd harmonics. And once again, the super knob is now turning one sound down while it turns the other sound up. All right? You can see in the screen the VU meters that show you what the activity is. You can see there that the sawtooth wave is now in full effect and there's nothing happening over here on the square wave. But as I pass 12 o'clock, where they're both in, all of a sudden the sawtooth is being turned down and we're only left with the square wave. All right? If you listen really closely, your ear still hears the square wave when I morph back to the sawtooth. Why? Because the harmonics are there. All I did was add the in-between harmonics, the even-numbered harmonics. So morphing is one of the big roles or big things that you can do in terms of using the super knob. In fact, the very first sound when you call up on the montage, you have the CFX Concert Grand that morphs into the FM electric piano. And this is the kind of thing, and this is how this is done. And we'll take a look at that inside the montage. Okay, let's drop into this sound and take a look. So I'm going to hit the edit button. And what we're going to look at, we're going to control assign, all right, on the common level. And here you can see, we're reviewing now, part 1, assign 1. That means part 1, the sawtooth wave's first knob is in control of its sound. Part 2, assign 2. So I'm using part 2, all right, using assign knob 2 to control it. All right, so what is happening now when I move one or the other, all right, you can see that I can turn down the sawtooth wave with knob 1, all right, and I can turn up the square wave with the other knob. So basically what I'm doing now is morphing these knobs. I'm turning 2 knobs, but in opposite directions with the super knob. That's what this is about. So we can drop in and take a look. Now, one of the things I want to show you, if you hold Shift and touch Home, it gives you an overview of what is happening inside of a particular sound. All right? There are 4 things in the screen that you can view. Controllers will be purple, assignable knobs will be green, faders will be tan, and the super knob is blue. So I'm going to eliminate the faders here because we know what they're doing. And you can see here that we're looking at knob 1 goes to part 1 and it's connected to the super knob. Knob 2 goes to part 2 and is connected to the super knob. All right, so this gives you an overview of what is happening. Now, the part that is selected is the common level, the upper common level. I can look at part 1. Part 1, all right, as you can see, is isolated to the super knob. And what happens when I move it? You can see the knob move, all right? It's turning up the volume, all right, there. If I go to part 2, all right, and I move this, you can see that it's moving the second knob, all right? So that when you're playing this, it's a way in which you can morph between one sound and the other, all right? And this is very, very musical because a lot of times it's about putting a sound in motion. Now, there are all things in terms of subtle changes that you can make. Maybe you want to morph an organ sound. All right. When you play an organ, a lot of times you have to learn to work the drawbars. All right. Well, this is like a programmable drawbar. If you have one organ setting and you want to morph to another organ setting, yeah, you can manually move all of the drawbars, or you can have the super knob do it for you automatically. So in other words, you can turn some sounds down and some sounds up. And remember, you can scale how far they move. It doesn't have to be totally out. It's up to you. Morphing sounds, one of the powers of the super knob.